Hey everybody, this is your one and only Goosebumps enthusiast back with another video, finally, after an, a huge break that very thankfully I am out of a reading slump. I'm back to reading books, get ready for more reviews soon, and I'm here with my dear friend, Goosebumps Completionist. How are you doing tonight, bro?
I'm doing great. Doing great. Started a new job recently, and I got a lot more free time in the afternoons on my hands, and I got some goosebumps to talk about. So I'm happy.
Heck yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Today we have a very kind of like different idea, nothing that someone has done before, and that is Bandwagon Goosebumps books. Now, what we're going to be talking about though is not just any Bandwagon books, but books that were praised, or we'll talk about books that were hated on by Goosebumps YouTubers in this community, and ever since have kind of had this bandwagon feeling to them where, let's just say, a YouTuber hated a book, a lot of people started to hate it, or if a YouTuber loved a book, a lot of people for some reason gravitate towards that book a lot more than they used to. So what we're going to do to start this video off is just knock off two honorable mentions that kind of break the video's rules, but I felt like these were kind of necessary to, you know, include, even though it's the absolute opposite of what we're talking about. So these are books, two books that people love to shit on. You don't see much positive talk at all, and I don't know if Completionists can really date back a point where these were starting to get crapped on, or if there was somebody that, I guess, inspired others. But the two that we're going to be talking about is, first of all, Be Careful What You Wish For. This is a book that, in recent times, I've seen mainly in the last 2 years, if I'm correct with that time estimate, has been very much hated on. This is not a book that people like whatsoever. A lot of people say that it's extremely boring, which I can agree. That's definitely a quality of this book that you would hate. But a lot of people, I think, give this book a lot of unfair treatments. Just roll with that mindset of like, oh yeah, I don't like Samantha as a character, which, I mean, this isn't a video made off of opinions from us two, but I think me and Completionist can both agree that Samantha is not really objectively a bad character. She's whatever, but that's not a huge reason you should hate the book. And that's definitely a common complaint I see besides the boring aspect. But yeah, this is definitely one that I see a lot of hatred towards. And Completionist, if you'd like to give your thoughts on this, you can do so.
Yeah. Be careful what you wish for. I've noticed since I've started collecting data, I've been doing this years long project now. And I'm still working on it actually, trying to compile community members, tier making lists of the original 62, and like where they put their top books, where they put their bottom books, which books they are. And I've noticed a massive trend throughout the community over the past few years that Be Careful What You Wish For consistently is put in the D tier and F tier by a bunch of casuals and even reviewers out there. And it perplexes me because if you want to know something about Be Careful What You Wish For, there's a very pivotal influencer from the mid 2000s that's kind of fallen into obscurity, and only like long-time community members remember this person at this point. But this person was Blogger Beware. And Blogger Beware, once upon a time, used to have a blog talking about Goosebumps and their thoughts on the books. Blogger said that Be Careful What You Wish For was the best Goosebumps book they had read, and that was their favorite. And it seemed like back in the day, this guy had a lot of pull with people. So, people respected Be Careful What You Wish For a little more. Maybe they didn't full on love it like he did, but it seemed to have mostly positive ideas. I'm not saying anything about the episode, I'm just talking about the book. Until years later, when Goosebumps YouTube started to come back after the movies and people started to make reviews on the books again and talking about Be Careful What You Wish For, saying that I've heard many people. I'm not trying to single anybody out in this video, other than maybe going back to the origins of where I noticed this phenomenon. Many people have said this book is a nothing burger, or it's bland, it's boring, it's cliche, it's trope filled, and they say it's one of the worst books for those reasons. But like you said, I do think that this book is a bit bandwagoned on the hate. You know what I mean? Like, if you put all that stuff aside, there is some good out of it. To say that it's like one of the worst Goosebumps books of all time, or in the top 5 contenders, I think is way too harsh for that book. Way too harsh. Like another book we're going to talk about next. Ironically, I'll go ahead and start this off. This was the book that Troy Steele, aka Blogger Beware, back in the day said was the worst Goosebumps book, which I think started the whole idea for the next book we're going to talk about. And you can share that whenever you're ready, Bruce.
Yeah, let's get straight into that. So the next honorable mention for this category is Chicken. So, I'll let you continue with this one.
So Chicken, like I said, it goes back to like Blogger Beware, and besides like the bumps being like the big fan site of the '90s into the early 2000s, when people started getting back on the internet talking about Goosebumps, you can go back. I've done this before and archived like blog posts I would find on Internet Archive or something. People just talking about Chicken post Blogger Beware. Everybody seems to be like, Chicken is the worst Goosebumps book. It has the worst parents, the dumbest characters, the most nonsensical plot, so on. Years later, people started adding on to the dog pile, saying, this is a ripoff of Stephen King's Thinner, which it is, for being honest, but, it's a reimagining. Then, it started to get kind of like picked on in a meme kind of way. Like, it's become like a meme in the community to kind of dunk on Chicken. And that's where when things become memes, it's hit a bandwagon status, or it's hit like viral potential here. It's not like it didn't earn street cred. It's just word of mouth has carried this for so long, it's become bigger than itself. And I think Chicken is the biggest token example of the inverse side of what we're going to be talking about, because of how long it's been dunked on. And many reviewers in recent times, there's some that still hold on to that sentiment. There's some people that still say and still maintain that Chicken's the worst book. And they always say, well, I heard from so-and-so, or I heard in the rumor mills that this is one of the worst Goosebumps books, and that was proven right. And then you have people who are like, nah, this isn't the worst. There's way worse. And there's more people actually starting to come around on the book more these days, because they kind of woke themselves out of the hate bubble they were stuck in with it. And that's just what I've observed. And I don't know if you observed the same thing, Bruce, but you can speak on that if you want.
Oh, yes. Going back to the one point you made, the whole characters suck, parents suck, blah, 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 villains are horrible. That's just, like, if we're really being honest, that's just not even true. Like, these are not bad characters. Like, seriously, they are not bad characters at all. You could say a lot of things about this book. That's not one of them. Bad villains? The only thing that I see as bad is that she's just not shown much, which, sorry for the spoiler, but if anything, that just gives her more, like, mystery, which I think is actually a quality to this book. And I think that there's a lot of good body horror, and overall, a lot of the hate is just stupid, and it feels like a lot of the people that hate on this book haven't fucking read it. Like, I have picked up on some stuff where people will say things that are just outlandish, and I'm like, have you even read the book? Like, there was a couple, like, 11-year-olds last year that were talking to me about worst Goosebumps books, and this was one that got mentioned, and their reasoning was just completely stupid, didn't make any sense, and that's why I feel like this is a great one to talk about. A lot of, like, casuals, like you said, with, like, be careful what you wish for, even, like, especially with this, casuals of Goosebumps have not read the weird oddball books like this. This is a weird book, but it's a rare one from, like, OG series, at least book 53, and you're like, how many people have seriously read this thing to the point where, like, the group consensus is that it's just horrible. Like, absolutely garbage. I've never seen it, and when I read this one, I was expecting it to be bad, and I read it and I was like, that was a fine book. I didn't think anything else. I just thought that was a fine book, decent read. I wouldn't recommend it to people. Like, I can see that area of, conversation. I just can't see people, saying that this is just the worst Goosebumps book ever. When there is far worse, ladies and gentlemen. There is books that most people have probably not even read that me and Calm can agree that are just way worse. To the point where, at least with Be Careful What You Wish For, this is not a good book. I will go out and say that this is kind of like a mid/bad one. Like, light bad, but mid/bad, kind of like a 4 out of 10 area. And, I can see why people hate it. I just don't know why it's so hated. With this, I just cannot see anything within it. I don't see potential to be, like, really hating this book so much as a lot of people have done. And I think, although we're going to talk about this specific YouTuber, and we're going to be name dropping, so if you guys are going to get mad, I want to just say, as you saw in the disclaimer in the beginning of the video, we are not attacking anybody. We are just saying the names of people who have influenced others. And with this one, I think another big influence is from the biggest Goosebumps YouTuber, Goosebumps Ozzy fan, who did a video reviewing every 62 book from the original series. And he gave this one by a long shot the worst score, which everyone was like, wait, I thought you would love every book. And I think that made people think, wow, if he doesn't like it, that must mean it's horrible. And I think that's what's happened. Although I can probably assume that maybe, yeah, he even got influenced by, like, Blogger Beware, for example, or just other people shitting on this book for so long. But yeah, that's those honorable mentions. I thought that those were very necessary to put in, but now we're actually going to get into picks that are, once again, from YouTubers who love these books, but have in recent times become kind of bandwagon-ish. So I guess I'm going to get this started off with our number 5, and the YouTuber in question is the one and only Goosebumps for Dummies, aka Alejandro, who really loves this one book called Egg Monsters from Mars. Now, I think this is a great example, not even because he's one of the biggest YouTubers, although he's kind of getting up in that range, but it's because he likes this book legitimately for for very, like, personal interests. He loves movies like E.T. supposedly, and this, I can agree, kind of reminds me of that, the whole alien thing. And, he even, to some extent, unlike the other people that we'll talk about later on, even he, to some extent, has said and admitted this to be kind of a bandwagon book ever since he started, like, simping for it so much. So, I thought this was a great one to mention. I don't have much to say about it besides the fact that I think this is actually a pretty good one, but I'm not sure if I'd put it in the ranks of best book, which is something a lot of people have done lately. I don't know if Comp has seen this, but if you'd like to give your input, go ahead.
The first thing I want to mention before we go any further, at least from my perspective of this, when you have a YouTube platform or any social media platform and you have an audience, there's no issue in you necessarily talking to the audience and possibly making an impact on their opinion. That's not a problem. Okay, we're just pointing out that because people have a platform and because they've been able to reach a broad audience, they have somehow impacted opinions because of their broad reach. That's all we're pointing out. Second thing, with Egg Monsters, right? Alex's love, because I know Alex personally. I've talked to him a couple times, behind the scenes, and I've known him for years. He's always adamantly loved this book. And I'll be honest, I think that I have influenced people in a book that we're not talking about in the video, like with Are You Terrified Yet? Where I just constantly repeat to people that I love this book, and I go to bat for it because I love it so much. And maybe I have influenced people on that book over the years. Not saying that it's necessarily good or bad, but with Egg Monsters from Mars, I have definitely noticed since Alex, if when I first started YouTube, I found Alex's channel when he was much younger, and I subbed to him because he was collecting stuff, and he's forever said that Egg Monsters from Mars is one of his favorite books. And ever since he started to grow his channel and get a bigger audience, like usually this is what happens when you get the channels that start to develop a broader scope.
Exactly. Yeah.
Most people saw this love for this book, maybe revisited it, or maybe first time read it, and thought it was as good as he did, which is not necessarily a bad thing. But you do see that phenomenon going on because a lot of people that I've noticed who like this book are also fans of Alex. If you ask them like, "Hey, do you watch Goosebumps for Dummies?" "Oh yeah." Like, okay, that makes sense. And like I said, we're not saying that this phenomenon is bad or anything. We're just kind of pointing out that the power of influence sometimes influences the audience's minds a bit. And yeah, Bruce, I think you're on the money because when I've seen like recent like top 5 favorite Goosebumps books or best OG62 books, Egg Monsters is starting to get put on there by a few younger folks that are in that circle that you guys run in. And I'm like, okay, well, how much is this you putting it there, or because you think everybody else agrees with that consensus, or are you trying to, it makes you question those things. But it is what it is. You don't really know how people think, unfortunately, on social media, but there is that trend there, and it's noticeable. So I think that's a good one to add to the list.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, this as well as all the other books going forward are very commonly found in top 5s. This is definitely a newer mention. Like, this hasn't really become of that status until recently, I feel. I think I already said that. But, like, the last couple years is when this really started to pop off, I guess, in love in the community. The rest of these, though, which we'll get into now, are I know 4 books, but these are actually from 2 YouTubers, and we're gonna basically talk about our next YouTuber, who is very popular, Michael Goosebumps fan. Me and Completionist, big fans of the channel, as for a lot of people, and that's why these 2 books. So I'll get started with our first one, and this is I feel like these are both so equal, but I feel like the one to start with, because I don't have as much to say on it, is this one. Night of the Living Dummy 3. Michael put out a review a very long time ago and said that he loved this book, and this was the best Slappy book, if I can recall. Now, not only did that happen, but in recent times, just about a year ago, or maybe a year and a half ago, he actually made an original 62 ranking, and this was also very high on the list. This thing was like, what, top 10? Top 10 probably. And I have seen so much love, so much praise to this book, to the point where it's almost gotten out of hand. Now, this is a good book in my opinion. Some people kind of just love to crap on this one, I've seen lately, because of how much people love it. Contrarians. But it's not that great. And I think that a lot of people, which we're not going to dabble into this, but if you want to check out Completionist video, we actually did a collab with someone named B Horror, or Horror Tavern, where we talk about books that get confused with the episodes. Well, both of these Michael ones are huge examples of that. So with this one, a thing that I see a lot of people defending this one for, and not outright just saying, yeah, Michael Goosebumps fan loved it, was something about how, multiple dummies come to life, which doesn't really happen until very, very late in the book. And at that point, it shouldn't be worth saying this is the best Slappy book or even one of the best of all time. So that's kind of how I feel. I know Michael actually did read this, of course. In his review, he didn't say anything like that from what I can remember. But it seems between the whole forgetting about the dummies coming to life plus the Michael Goosebumps fan thing, this has become, in recent years, easily one of the highest rated books. And it's just, when you have false claims, it's a good way to know that these are not, like, I guess, people that have read the book very thoroughly, or if they did, it was a long ass time ago, because they do not remember this. They remember the episode, or they'll remember stuff that Michael said was good, because usually in good reviews, this is just a common thing. You'll see a lot more praise towards good than you will bad. There will basically be no bad talk about the book, especially when it's, of course, Michael's favorite, or like one of his favorites. So yeah, that's the one I see commonly put in ranks of top 10, top 5 even. And it's just kind of hard to see for me. I don't know what you think about this, but I'm sure you kind of have most of the same stuff to say. But yeah, let's pass this over to Completionist.
So yeah, the Dummy 3 phenomenon, when I first started YouTube, Michael was like the first channel I found. Michael, I still watch him today. I watch all of his other channels. Me and him are good friends. He has a lot. He has the power of words. He has an addicting voice. He has short and sweet content. And Night of the Living Dummy 3 is one of his earliest videos I watched. And I can remember, and you can fact check me on this. I'm probably right. He did mention that. I think maybe in his episode review, he said the episode and the book have lots of differences. But he likes them both for their own ways. So that's fine, right? There's no problem in that. But post that, you know what I mean? Post him coming out with those emotions on his reviews, I've seen so many people echoing the same things Michael said in his review about the book or the episode. Like I said, I can't fault Michael because Michael's just the content creator. This is more a poke at the audience for echoing this. I definitely feel like his opinion impacted the minds of like Slappy fans a little bit. When I've seen many, especially some older videos from a certain YouTuber out there, he should not be named. When they did former Slappy rankings, you see Dummy 3 in like top 2, and you see this person put Dummy 3 in the top 5 original 62, and then like even one YouTuber said, this is in my top. This is my top favorite book, and I'm like, okay, well, where was this? Years ago when people talked about dummy books, it was like, okay, yeah, you have 1, 2, and 3. Then you got Bride. Then you got Slappy's Nightmare, and then you got some moderns coming out. But the biggest one historically was always like Dummy 1 or Dummy 2. When I was growing up, people said Dummy 1 or Dummy 2, and that's its own different thing. But they're nowhere near as bandwagon. Like I'm talking genuine bandwagoning going on here with Dummy 3. It's like they all say the same thing of why they like it, and then after some time, when you get some confirmation that they have now thought about it a little bit more and started to consciously compare what they liked in the episode or the book, they're like, yeah, I like the episode more, and the book's gone down some pegs. It's its own thing. It's something to witness, but I think it's there.
I don't have much to add, but I guess we might as well just talk about this next one since it's very similar. I don't even think we have to talk much about it, but Haunted Mask 2. I mean, this has been talked about so much to the point where it's kind of like, a staple in controversial Goosebumps books where it's basically, yeah, the same thing with Dummy 3. Michael said he loved it. People started to say they loved it. And it's the same thing with the episode versus book thing. This is so different from the book that it's like the episode is. It is so different from the book that it's hard to compare. And Yeah, it's. I don't even know if we have to talk about this one. It's the same deal. Except with this one, I'd say it's even worse, as this is Michael Goosebumps fan's favorite book of all time in Goosebumps. So, yeah, let's just get that one out of the way. And for our
Well,
last,
you know,
yeah, you go.
I want to add something to that. With Haunted Mask 2. So Haunted Mask 2, right? I considered putting that book on my cult following video. I thought it legitimately had a cult following type audience going for it, especially these days because of how divisive the book can be. But the thing about Haunted Mask 2, and we've already touched on this with Dummy 3. Haunted Mask 2 and Dummy 3 have fan favorite episodes, right? And they're different from the source material. They have moments in them that most of the time fans prefer in the episodes. So when people maybe that haven't read the books in a long time, maybe you can call yourself a 90s head, you can call yourself an old school fan, maybe you haven't read the books in decades. When you think back on these stories, you think back onto what you remember from the episodes, and that kind of blends into your mind. Or maybe you have a brain like a sponge, like me, and you can remember the book and still appreciate the book for what it is. That's not the problem, right? I don't even think this is a problem to have necessarily, more than just to discuss on it. But uh, the bandwagoning for Haunted Mask 2, I feel, has come out of this mindset of people, coming out trailblazing, not necessarily for Haunted Mask 2, and I'm going to kind of poke the prod the coals here with this, but these are more people that are kind of speaking out against the first Haunted Mask. You think that the first Haunted Mask isn't that good, right? I'm just calling out the trends. When I see people praise Haunted Mask 2 that highly, most of the time it's to prop Haunted Mask 1 down, you know. And I'm not saying that that's a good thing to do with a book. You shouldn't prop up something that high or covet it highly in like a top 5 favorite books of all time way, because you think the book previously is overrated or something. But that's just what I'm seeing. Or on the inverse coin, you have people genuinely, like we already talked about this in our collab previously, where people are genuinely confusing things that happen in the episode with the book. Or they'll be like, you know, this person said that this book was great. I checked it out and I agree. I loved it like them. That you could take a recommendation, that's fine, but the bandwagon has grown on this book tremendously. I mean, Bruce, when you were reading through Original 62, I'm gonna say it like it is. You had Haunted Mask 2 as your number one book for quite some time. And this is when you're first starting out, so I was like, let him get more into the series, and then it changed, of course. But you can see that Haunted Mask 2 has now become like this, cool thing to like. You know what I mean? It's kind of like a phase that people go through, and they think that like they're consumed by the phase. That's what I think Haunted Mask 2 is in right now. I think it's a phase. Maybe I don't know about Dummy 3. Maybe that will end like a phase, but for the past few years, it's just growing and growing and growing on that bandwagon to the point where it's almost like cult following status, or it's pretty much there. So there you go.
Oh yeah, and like to talk about my opinion, my old opinion, that is still one of my favorite books from the OG series. I'll still admit that's a top tenner for me, um, given the differences as well from book and episode. But at the time, like you said, with the whole "it's cool to like this," that's kind of how it went. I mean, it was cool to like that book, and what's hilarious is that I was scared to change it because I thought it was cool. Like, I'm not even fucking serious. I am serious. It was like, why would I want to put what is now Deep Trouble as my favorite? Why would I want to have this book that people hate all the time, or think it's mid or not goosebumpsy, as my number one, when I can have this super cool, like, awesome sequel book as my number one, which is much more liked and also the favorite book from Michael Goosebumps fans. So yeah, hopefully I'm one of the only people to go through that, but You never know.
You know, if you love Haunted Mess 2, Dummy 3, or any of these other books we've discussed so far, that's, like I said, it's not an issue. It's just that all we're saying is that post this person or a certain person coming out with love for this, it seems to have influenced popular opinion about it. So it's just something that's there, and it's the power of social media at the end of the day. But yeah, let's get to the top two, because these two I have noticed since I first got back into Goosebumps. Like these, when I was got back into, Goosebumps, and I was looking on YouTube, looking around people's opinions. These two were hugely talked about. It seemed like maybe back in like 2019, 2020 times, more so. But it's still a thing today, because it comes from a big YouTuber. And like we said, I'm gonna keep reiterating this. Because a YouTuber likes it, it's not the YouTuber's fault. It's just the power of the reach the YouTuber has, and the audience is, taking in of opinions. But Bruce, let's go ahead and talk about them, because they're definitely fitting at the top two.
Yeah, and just really quickly before I show them, I really gotta reiterate, Bjorn, this is not an attack on you or like your fan base. What kind of is, but on your fan base, on the fan base's part, I'm gonna say this really fucking clearly. Bjorn's audience is just a thing. It's a younger audience, or at least it was before he did some questionable acts. But he had a very young audience for a long time. I mean, I started watching the dude when I was 7. Okay, and the thing is, with this, is that these are young kids who probably don't read, so they might be posing. I hate to say that, but they might be, or they are, most of them. So what we're going to be talking about is, for our last two, we'll go into the less extreme of the two, but Slappy's Nightmare. All right, I'm gonna be upfront. I made a review on this, so I'm not gonna get into personal reasons too in depth. But this is not, in my opinion, a great book. Whatever. The majority says that this thing is like the best Slappy book / top 3 Slappy books, and some have said top 5 Goosebumps, top 10 Goosebumps. Dude, this is a later Series 2000, which doesn't mean it can't be good, but this is a later Series 2000. This was not a common part of the series. People were not interested in Goosebumps at the time. Why were so many people finding out about this book? Well, who frickin' guessed? It was because of Bjorn's channel, where he made videos talking about this book. He loves this book, and that's totally fine. It's subjective. And the thing is that it's so just transparent how easy it is to see that this is, yes, all Bjorn's fault. Not as a bad way, but you can tell that this thing was not a popular book before Bjorn talked about it. Or I don't know if he got influenced by some other person, but it's insane how much love this book gets. I mean, absolutely fucking crazy. And, personal reasons aside, like, I just think that this book isn't that well written. Like, it's kind of like most of the dummy books. It's tropey, which is fine. It's samey, which is fine, I guess, if you really like Slappy or something, but it's just, it's weird how Bjorn picked this one, which is, once again, fine, but it's weird how he picked this one, and people just went, hell yeah, Slappy's Nightmare. This was at a very dark time in Goosebumps. This was when no one was buying these things. You know how much this book goes for? You don't want to know. Okay, this like, I somehow got lucky enough to find this, but who knows? Maybe I got my copy because someone bought it thinking that maybe it's good because this guy said it. I'm saying that, and that's a bold claim, but you never know because of how big Ozzy fan is. This book, ever since he started making those videos, has been talked about so much to the point where it's probably, in terms of like how much books are talked about, like maybe top 10 ever. Which is hilarious because this is our number 2 pick. But we'll get into number 1 in a minute, which I'm sure everyone can guess. But I'm gonna let Completionist speak on this one. Do you have any extra thoughts?
Well, yeah, Slappy's Nightmare. No, part of the mystique I feel of Slappy's Nightmare is that when people talk about it, they're like, "Oh, this is the Slappy book that has gone unreprinted." So it has a bit of fandom lore. Like, this is the Slappy book that Scholastic wants to make you forget, and then people hear like word of mouth, like, "Oh, this is the best Slappy book. You got to read this," and it drives up demand, which drives up the price of the book. It's expensive. People pay all this money thinking that, oh, it's worth all this money because it's this great book. I get the amount of hype this book generates just off word of mouth alone is enough to topple expectations, especially if you think the book doesn't meet them. And I can totally see if you hear the hype that people claim this book to be for a Slappy book, and then be let down by the end of it. And I'm not even exaggerating when I say by the end of it. But I will say this. Bjorn is, without a doubt, the most influential Goosebumps YouTuber of all time. He's the biggest channel. He has the biggest collection, I think, in the world of Goosebumps merchandise. He has a tremendous backlog of amazing things in his collection. I mean, the guy, he has a pretty much a Goosebumps museum, right? That's like one of the coolest things ever. Back in the day, when I started YouTube and I was looking at people's opinions on Goosebumps, because, I wanted to look for people closer to my age that grew up with these books. And I found a bunch of grown man children like myself talking about these books on the internet. And I'm like, okay, well, let's see what they're saying about, what's their favorite book. And, maybe I'll think back and see if I read it. And then I found Bjorn's videos saying Slappy's Nightmare. Then I found a bunch of other YouTubers that have gone throughout the years talking about Slappy's Nightmare being like this, like, they'll mention it in like a Series 2000, lot buy or something. And they'll be like, oh, this is the best Slappy book. Oh, this is the best Slappy book. Oh, this is the best Slappy book. And I'm like, okay, all matches up to that time period where, these contents were coming out. In today's climate, I think where people are at now with Slappy's Nightmare is that people still talk about it in that infamous lore-filled way. It still has that mystique because of the reasons I brought up of it being unreprinted, because it's so expensive, because people have historically said it's so good. People just put it on this high pedestal. And it's become one of those books that, people, I think, are afraid to say anything negative about it, especially if when you're in that Slappy crowd, whenever people talk about books and they just constantly bring up Slappy, if you bring up Slappy's Nightmare and you start to kind of dissect the book a little bit, you'll start to see people just like come out about it, like, like, okay, well, you got a point there, but normally when you're looking at, this is beyond casual stuff. If you have a copy of Slappy's Nightmare, you're not a Goosebumps casual. You're probably a collector or a fan because you went out of your way to find this and buy this, most likely. But you still see that bandwagon of people just saying, "Oh, this is the best Slappy book," when there's so many other Slappy books out there, and even like I think it's up there with Dummy 3 of them two constantly competing with each other with the bandwagon of Slappy books.
Yeah, and now that you bring that up, that just further proves our point that, how we're talking about Dummy 3, this was for a very long time the best Slappy book or the best Goosebumps whatever. And then as soon as that Michael thing dropped, now Dummy 3 has a competition with it. It's
you got a point.
You get our point. Yeah. It's
you got a point. I mean, and like I said, it's not the YouTuber's fault. You're totally capable of having your own opinion as a YouTuber, and you can put your opinion out there. And if it reaches 16,000 people, 20,000 people, or even like 2,000-3,000 people, all it takes is for a handful of those people to spread, something on Reddit or in a Discord chat or on Twitter, and then that catches 700 views, 1,000 views, whatever, and they start taking that impression that you left on, and it kind of snowballs. the Slappy craze. I'm not gonna lie. The Goosebumps movies did help the Slappy craze. People were talking about Goosebumps again. Slappy was the mascot, so of course Slappy's gonna get more views than everybody else. So part of it, I do feel, especially around the time of the movies coming out, that people were kind of propping up a Slappy book or like something like Slappy's Nightmare to say that it's one of the best books because they felt obligated, maybe. And I do feel like some people, especially old content creators, kind of had that mentality. Especially people that were like talking about, the news of the movies and stuff. But those videos are kind of buried by YouTube these days because it's outdated algorithm. But it still kind of feeds the same purpose. So
Yeah, and sorry for changing locations. My phone's about to die. I guess we'll just talk about the next book, and this is like beyond, like without a doubt, like not even a competition. I think we can both agree the most over bandwagon book in Goosebumps, or maybe even anything in Goosebumps. And that is also Bjorn with this book, The Horror at Camp Jelly Jam. I don't know what to say about this one besides the fact that this is a book that I will constantly see being brought up within top best Goosebumps, whatever, you get the point. And then you start saying some of its flaws, and people go, I mean, like that talk. And it's like, you don't have a great defense of this book. I can tell just by the way you're, phrasing sentences. And it's kind of almost funny to me because they always deny, uh, they always deny having any sort of influence from Bjorn. And if you guys have not joined my Discord server with Alex, from Goosebumps for Dummies, you would know that there's a lot of people in there that think, once again, that this is just one of the best Goosebumps books, and then you start talking them down, and they do that, yeah, yeah, but talk. And it just gets irritating, and it's the same types of people over and over again. How I already mentioned with the young audience thing. Seems like most people that love this book are young audiences, very young. Even going as far to say people that are the actual reading level age for Goosebumps. So, yeah, I don't have much to say about this that hasn't been said, but it's kind of crazy how much this book is loved. I think that it can be loved. I'm not saying it's a bad thing if you like it, but you have to have solid reasoning. And this is one that, unlike any of the other books on this list, I can definitively say 90% of people do not.
well,
So, yeah.
I'll tell you. I follow this blogger, this current blogger, called That Retro. And Retro put on they made a blog post that was talking about the definitive 10 Goosebumps books, and what they mean by that is not like the definitive like best books, but like these are the books that have become the pillars of Goosebumps, like the classic run. And along the ranks of Welcome to Dead House, Stay Out of the Basement, Welcome to Camp Nightmare, The Girl Who Cried Monster, The Ghost Next Door, The Werewolf of Fever Swamp, One Day at Horrorland, A Night in Terror Tower. Well, the Horror Camp Jelly Jam was put on there as the 10th pillar because of how much people recognize this book these days. And look, we're talking about within the confines around the first half of the original 62. So it's not that Horror Camp Jelly Jam isn't a recognizable book. It's just that even though it was one of the first Goosebumps books I ever read back in like the year 2000, 2001, when I was like 6 years old or 7 years old reading these for the first time. With that aside, I never heard people praise Jelly Jam. This was not a book years ago that I think if Retro were to make a definitive 10, and it would go back to the year 2001, this would not have been on there. The definitive 10 would have looked a little bit different. But these days, people talk about it more, and people have nostalgia for it, whether it's the cover or whether it's the camp setting. The camp books just have this power over people in the classic Goosebumps era. Jelly Jam is one of the definitive 4. In terms of camp books, the first 4 are commonly called like the token
Cold
4
Lake.
camp books. Cold Lake, even Cold Lake's thrown in there. Like, those are the only camp books you should care about in Goosebumps. People always say that. But Jelly Jam's mystique, that, you know, when I got back into Goosebumps and I was watching people, Jelly Jam was a book that started to get a lot of hype. And I was like, where, you know, I don't really remember Jelly Jam being that hype. And then, you know, when you bring up Bjorn's top 10 Goosebumps books video is one of the most viewed ranking videos on YouTube for Goosebumps. I get it. You know, a lot of people watch the video. It's had years to brew. A lot of people in circles, in their circles, they say, "Oh, Jelly Jams is this good book or bad." You know, newer fans getting in to YouTube or watching influencers on YouTube or social media because they got into the movies. They come in, people telling them, go read Jelly Jam, it's one of the best books or the best book, and people catch on to that, buy into it. But I want to, you know, at this point in time, I can see Jelly Jam still being that bandwagon book, like the token bandwagon book. It's not something like Welcome to Dead House or Stay Out of the Basement, right? Where there's some validity to it. You know what I feel? And you could probably make an argument that every liked Goosebumps book has a bandwagon out there, but I think Bjorn's love for Jelly Jam really rubbed off, and that enthusiasm really rubbed off on impressionable fans back in the day. Like hearing his love, I'm gonna be honest. Hearing his love before I even started reading the books again, hearing his love for the book, I was like, man, he makes me remember the book in a different way, and I was really like vibing, and I was like, oh, I can't wait to reread it again. I recently reread it and I liked it, but it wasn't as good to me as what he said it was, but I still liked it. But you'd be shocked by how many people say they love this book to that extent, and it just seems to me that it's happened in more recent years than it's deserved. And maybe, you know, maybe it finally found an audience. Maybe people appreciate it more than they did back in the day. Who knows? Sometimes that happens too naturally. But I do see the social media element playing a factor in that. So that's why I think I'm comfortable saying it's number 1 as well.
Yeah, I mean, the entire top 5 list that we made here is like, I feel like we can both kind of agree with each of the placements, and weirdly enough, as we kind of said with the YouTubers, it kind of goes from most popular at number 1 to least popular at number 5, which I think is just an even better way to just prove whatever we're saying is bandwagons, because the more people that know about it, the more people that are going to bandwagon it. So yeah, that was the video. It was super nice collabing with you, Completionist. I hope that we can do something like this in the future. Obviously, we already have done plenty of these. If you'd like to check out some of the collabs on his channel, please do so. We did some really good ones a while back. And if not, just check out his channel. The dude's amazing. I mean, I'm assuming most people that are subscribed to me are subscribed to him, but if you are not for some godforsaken reason, please fucking do so. The man's a legend. And with that, I hope you all have a great night, and yeah, keep bumping.